All right, welcome everyone to this talk, Data and Discipline, Creating Most Valuable Experiences with the 80-20 Rule. I'd like to introduce our speakers today, Jake Kelly and Jill Farley.
Hi, I'm Jake Kelly. I'm the product owner for HonorHealth.com. I was tasked with determining our future needs for a web presence, the subsequent scoping and vendor evaluation, and then leading the process with our selected partner.
Hi, I'm Jill Farley. I'm a senior web strategist and UX architect at Palantir.net. And I was a lead strategist on our project with HonorHealth, and I was responsible for the user research effort, crafting the information architecture of the site, and working with Jake's team and our Palantir team of designers and developers to build the site in line with our strategic recommendations. And I've been doing this a long time, but I have been working with healthcare clients almost exclusively for the past 3 years.
What you can expect from the talk today, Jake's going to speak a little bit about the problem space in which HonorHealth was faced. Jill is going to talk about the approach that Palantir took to the problem, and then I'm going to run a little bit of a Q&A session with these two product owners. So with that, Jake, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Nelson. So our vision for HonorHealth.com was really multifaceted. And first we had to start by identifying our needs and what that looked like in a change process. So the big ones were really our overall strategy, our flexibility with our content and with the site, as well as our provider directory listing, as well as our locations. Now, the big thing here is that our user experience largely was driven by internal organizational inputs. And this is not all that uncommon in healthcare. Certain stakeholders get certain input and certain emphasis is placed on it. But in 2018, HonorHealth put forth a new initiative, and that was consumerism. Our patients are our consumers, and our goal is to serve the needs of the primary audience visiting HonorHealth.com. We conducted a bit of user testing, and on a consistent basis, the results were pretty poor. Users would often get lost and frustrated trying to find simple resources that we asked them to find. As far as content flexibility, we were really in the habit of writing a ton of inline HTML to get each page kind of optimal in the way that we wanted it to look, which of course means that site redesigns become pretty much out of the question. Without touching every single individual page. The final piece in our change driver is that our directory listing. Again, as a part of the strategy, this was driven not by the end user, but by organizational inputs. So we ran focus groups, and users' biggest hang up with our system was that they couldn't figure out how to use it. And they felt like we were putting the burden of responsibility on them in order to figure out how to use our system. This led to a really common recurring theme where our patients would use Google business listings and the Google search instead of the infrastructure that we had built. And obviously this is counterintuitive to the reason of having a directory listing on a website. So what we had envisioned with those change metrics was really that we wanted to move towards a more intuitive user experience. We wanted to prepare ourselves for the future, and in line with the strategy, we wanted to create a focus on the consumer. So as far as intuition, we took a look at the different sites that exist in the space, and an e-commerce type of approach seemed the most reasonable. We want a user or a patient or a consumer to accomplish what they want within 2 clicks, right? 2 clicks is great. 3 clicks is desirable. 4 clicks is acceptable, and so on and so forth down the chain. Then as far as setting us up for the future, this is a highly volatile industry, and it's driven more and more by the consumer and their needs and wants every day. So how do we accommodate for the changing nature of the needs of the people visiting our site? The answer to that, of course, is a modular and component-driven design that would enable us to do site redesigns and all these sorts of things. And then finally, consumer focus. Who is our primary audience? What are they trying to do? Where are we failing our users? How can we be better? In order to actually even answer these questions, We're going to do a lot of data research and market research to understand what are patients actually wanting from us. And so finally, that led us to building, coming up with a new site redesign, and that was with a partnership with Palantir. So from the organizational side, we had to restructure our team, and the way that is done, we had to restructure our contracts and how we contract with a web development partner. And of course, we had to select a partner, which ended up being Palantir. So our corporate restructuring in the organization, the way that our team is built, it really empowered the people with the most intimate knowledge in the space with the responsibility to make the best decisions for our patients as possible, also giving the power to make those decisions. As far as contracting, fixed bid projects are the earmark of corporations, and that's even more so in the healthcare industry. So if we want to be a truly transformative data play, you got to be an early adopter, right? You got to adopt new process, new technology, and new methodologies. You got to lead the curve instead of following your competitors. So why Palantir? Why did we choose Palantir? Highly recommended from multiple sources within the industry for their expertise on the Drupal platform. We were sticking with Drupal, so it's kind of a easy enough decision there. And then we had to amass enough evidence to placate those worried stakeholders about the restructuring of the contracts. And Palantir's proven track record really put a lot of those fears at ease for even the most fearful of stakeholders within the organization. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the 80-20 approach with Jill.
Thanks, Jake. So I'm going to talk a little bit more process, a little bit about how we met the needs of HonorHealth after all of their preparation for moving into this project and this partnership. And our approach on the HonorHealth project was based on the notion that 80% of our effort on the website should really be focused on the top 20% of what users need. So if you're familiar with that principle, it's really about just prioritization. And again, luckily, as you heard from Jake, HonorHealth was already bought into this notion. So really customer-centric, really focusing on user needs versus internal needs. And in general, healthcare websites have a lot of stakeholders and could do about 100 to 1,000 different jobs. But what do your target audiences really need from the site? That's what we focused on. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of data to stick to this principle. So here's how we did it. Our first step was to conduct foundational research. There was a lot of research coming to us from the HonorHealth side, but we wanted to sort of supplement that with something called top tasks. We regularly use this research method, and it was founded by Jerry McGovern. If you haven't heard of him, I highly recommend checking him out. It's a pretty simple process. You work together with your client, in this case, Jake and his internal team. We work together with them to narrow down the 40 to 60 things people may want to do on your site. This is coming from, analytics, from any usability research that I've done, and also just sort of a baseline of what people tend to need to do on healthcare sites. So then you survey real users. In this case, we got about 360 responses. Luckily, HonorHealth had a sort of a panel or marketing list that we were able to tap into, and it allowed it to be statistically significant. So the survey itself is really simple. It's just several questions, and one of the main questions is just, what is most important to you when thinking about healthcare or trying to accomplish something within healthcare? You overwhelm them with choices, which is about 40 to 60. It sounds counterintuitive, but this method is proven. And you tell them to pick 5. Their instincts kick in and they go with their gut about what's most important to them. And so the result of this foundational research work is that you have an incredibly clear picture of what people say is important to them. And again, this provides the baseline for what you want to focus on for the site redesign. So briefly, here's just an example of our output from that survey. And you'll see there's 4 quadrants. The data is really straightforward from this research. Out of 40 possible tasks, the top 2 tasks, in our case for this project, people selected accessing MyChart and making and managing appointments, got as many votes from our patient respondents as the bottom entire bottom 27 tasks. That's pretty powerful. The number one task, accessing my chart, received as many votes as the bottom 24 tasks. So you start to see sort of the most important priority things floating up to the top. And it was very, very obvious to us at this point what people needed to do on the site. So the next step is to expand out those tasks to what we call most valuable experiences. Most valuable experiences are kind of akin to user flows. You know, it's not really a coined term, but this is what we call it. They encompass the experiences on the site that support the main things that users want to accomplish. So while those top tasks are things people want to get done, the most valuable experiences are the pages, the content, the functionality that help them get there. So these most valuable experiences and really narrowing down on a small number of them helped us communicate priorities to non-technical and often distracted, busy stakeholders who may have a lot of different priorities swirling around. When you really narrow it down and can define it and root it in data, it helps to communicate that. And we boiled it down to only a few areas we wanted to get right. The more we repeated ourselves and the more we supported these most valuable experiences and our focus on them with data, the more that it sunk in that this is what we were going to be spending 80% of our effort on this project on, and people got on board. Next, it was time to create. So, you know, it sounds maybe like I'm talking about a typical kind of website development process, but for us, we just tweak some of those steps slightly to kind of optimize them as much as we can. So in this case, sketching was our next step. Now, in some organizations or agencies, you jump right to wireframes, but it's our belief that the client should be co-creating some of these kind of concepts of the experiences with us. So it was a crucial step for us in this process. Jake and his team had homework prior to each of these sketch sessions. They joined us, they rolled up their sleeves, and we brought our whole team. So we had designers, developers, and strategists, and we had a sketch session, even sometimes multiple sketch sessions for each most valuable experience. We used Envisioned Freehand, which is a virtual whiteboarding tool. We did all these remote, and during the session, we looked at competitors, we drew pages, we noted functionality questions, we documented field and data definition, and overall, we made sure in these sessions in a very low fidelity environment that everyone had the same vision and expectations for what a user would experience for each of these key experiences before we moved into the wireframe stage. Simultaneously, while the sketching was going on, we moved to the second phase of our research, which is all around information architecture. So using our top tasks as findability questions, we tested the quality of our top level menu structure using Optimal Workshop. It's a tool that does a lot of really cool user testing methods. So doing this allows us to actually root our decisions around the menu in data. A tree test really exposes what menu labels people gravitate to when they're trying to accomplish their tasks. So here's just an example of one of the really cool visual charts that comes out of Optimal Workshop. And the basic premise is, as the user's moving through the test, if they select a label where they'd actually find this information in the new information architecture structure, it's a success. So we define the right answers, and if they pick the right answer, it's a success. If they select another label where that information wouldn't live, it's a fail. And more fails mean the labels are unclear. Optimal Workshop, again, as I mentioned, has a really great set of visual charts that helps you communicate these areas that need adjusting to your stakeholders very clearly. More red is not good, more green is good. So it's very obvious when you're putting this information in front of stakeholders that certain things didn't work out. So more fails mean the labels are unclear, as I said, and we had some obvious fails. So we were able to really adjust those labels and make them clearer even before the site was even built. And the final step is really just getting to the higher fidelity work of putting the user experience together. So by the time we got to wireframes and designs, we had a lot of legs to stand on. The data and the repeated priorities around these most valuable experiences made the design decisions way easier. We weren't starting from scratch. Stakeholders already knew why we put things in certain places. So they tended to question the design work less. And if they started to stray and kind of get internally focused again, it was really easy for us to point back to the data and steer them back. So you'll see here our final homepage design. Our patients' top 5 tasks were all directly accessible above the fold on the homepage, and they were all present in the universal menu. So from that standpoint, we were really hitting what users told us they needed the most and gave them direct access. As Jake said, one click is optimal. We gave them direct access to the things that they needed based on data. Nelson, back to you.
So HonorHealth invested quite a bit in this data and strategy organizationally. Jake, how do you feel that this work has served you beyond the launch of the website?
That the top task research is something that really has helped to make our position defensible for all the decisions that we made as far as catering to consumers. It's pretty commonplace that we'll get all sorts of inquiries bubbling up within the organizations that might go up within their particular vertical. It might reach a C-level and then come back down into our department. And the ability to be able to defend the decisions you made using concrete data and evidence, specifically in the healthcare field, is like the most rock solid defense you could ever have, right? I mean, evidence-based practice is the de facto standard in the healthcare space now. And this is the same thing. It's just evidence-based consumer wants. And if that aligns with your organizational strategy, you have a rock solid defense, so to speak.
What was one of the most surprising things that you learned as a result of going through this process and getting this data?
I have 2 things I think that was most surprising to me. After executing the top task research several times with different healthcare organizations, while the tasks the set of tasks tend to be the same across that we test with across the different organizations, the top 5 to 7 tasks do shift depending on the either the market or the particular set of consumers with those organizations. So the top 5 to 7 usually are kind of the same, but the top 2 tasks were so definitive with HonorHealth. It was amazing. I mean, usually we don't see that 25% of votes is concentrated on 2 tasks specifically, but it made it really easy because we were able to meet people's needs by just making sure that those 2 dominant tasks were super duper accessible. So that was the first one. And the second one was, I don't think I gave Jake and his team enough credit at the beginning. We kind of assumed that we would invite them to these sketch sessions and they would just sort of sit back and listen and let us do all the design work. And they jumped right in. They used the data they had at their fingertips and the data that we gave them and their own ideas about some of the pain points that they'd experienced. And they sketched right along with us. They were drawing, they were, writing notes, they were contributing to those sessions. And so I think a huge takeaway is don't underestimate your clients. They want to be hands-on and they want to contribute. And so I think that made everything stronger instead of us just coming back and showing them wireframes that we just kind of cooked up in the back room.
I would echo this kind of the same sentiment that Jill just outlined, where the 80-20 rule and how few tasks there were that comprised such a large portion of the needs of our user base. I believe in the 80-20 rule as a general thing in populations and society, and yet for some reason I didn't actually apply it to our website, but it rang true. 80% of our users are trying to accomplish a few tasks, and to serve them is actually very easy. We just needed the data to inform those decisions.
So on that point, I think probably, there'll probably be healthcare organizations watching this that say, oh yeah, the obvious thing that our patients want to do is X, Y, or Z. What advice might you give those healthcare organizations that are thinking about embarking on this type of work or skipping this type of work or, potentially embarking on just an entire website project?
I would just underscore the importance of it. We all thought we knew, and yet there was no good way to confirm it. And user testing consistently yielded that we were missing the mark. And I mean, everything we were doing on our old site was a common sense approach. What am I looking for as a healthcare consumer? Why am I visiting a site? And you answer those questions and you extrapolate and you go ahead and put down the pathway that you think makes the most sense. And it turns out it doesn't actually make sense to your users. There is nothing better than straight from the horse's mouth evidence. And that's what we got.
And to add to that, I think looking at a project beyond the initial research, the formative research and the launch, continuing to validate that, which it sounds like the HonorHealth team is doing, is really important. So it's one thing to basically build your site on the foundation of research. It's another to test to make sure that the execution of the site, whether it's through the content or the user experience that you develop, is actually delivering on that, is really important. Because otherwise, yes, you've taken a step to say, hey, our design and our user experience is based in data, but a lot happens to your site between when you do design comps and when you actually release it into the wild. So quarterly or, multiple times a year, just evaluating whether people are able to accomplish those tasks that they've told you are important is really key. Jerry McGovern also talks about like key performance indicator evaluation. And so making sure that you set those up at the beginning and then you continue this method of continuous testing is really, really important. So don't just think that you're sort of done because you've done the research one time. Highly recommend that you continue to either internally or through a partnership, keep doing the research, keep validating with your users, because a website grows over time. And you want to always stay focused on that.
You're jogging all these thoughts for me, Jill. So we are right now, we're revisiting the top task survey to go ahead and validate that. I mean, obviously we just had the COVID issues and a lot of the workforce has moved remote. And so we're reevaluating the landscape to validate and make sure that the research that we did a year ago is still valid and reliable and the top tasks that our users are trying to accomplish. And the beauty of all this is the research methodology has already been created. I already touched on evidence-based practice, and part of the key of EBP is to be able to recreate the exact mechanisms at play to replicate those clinical outcomes. We are using the exact same research methodology. So there should be no, undercuts to bias or validity. We should have a one-to-one recreation of what we did a year ago, and we can use that exact information to inform our decisions for the next year. And we can just keep iterating on this. And that's cool.
Well, thank you both so much for your time and sharing your experience on this. And we'll look forward to seeing what HonorHealth is able to do with their digital experiences going forward. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson.